أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Welcome to another edition of Finding Me on ITV. Contrary to popular belief, says Fazila Siddiqui in the Huffington Post, Muslim women have served as revolutionary and heroic leaders. In recent years, due to the global political and socio-political climate, the phrase Muslim woman may conjure up images of a woman, a demure-looking woman who was clad in a hijab, were capable of very little, and of course, somebody who lacks much intelligence. Yet our history and our records present or reflect something totally different. For example, let's consider the current Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina Wazid, the current President of Kosovo, Atife Jahjaga, who is the world's youngest female president, as well as her country's first female Muslim president, and the ex-Prime Minister of Mali, Tise Mariam Keidema Sidibe. These are all Muslim women. Since 1988, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Mali, Pakistan, Kosovo, Tajikistan, Senegal and Turkey have been led at some point by a Muslim woman, a president or a prime minister. Now juxtapose this with Hillary Clinton, who ran for the president of the US in 2008 and noted in her concession speech, "I am a woman, and like millions of women, I know there are still barriers and biases out there, often unconscious, and I want to build an America that respects and embraces the potential of every last one of us." So, perhaps one may say that the most powerful and dominant country in the world, till today, is still battling to have a female president or a prime minister. Yet the so-called backward Muslim populations of the world have already surpassed those expectations. Take a moment, of course, also to reflect on Fatou Bensouda. She is the first African and Muslim woman to hold the position of Chief Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. In 2012, the Time magazine named Bensouda as one of the 100 most influential people in the world. Following in these footsteps is our very own Raeesa Cachalia. Raeesa is a BA Law graduate. She has majored in international relations at the University of Pretoria and has been working with the Consultancy Africa Intelligence Unit since July 2011. Raeesa hopes to pursue her master's in human rights law, inshallah. She has also authored 2 articles on the future of the Arab Spring, which discusses the paranoia around the growth of political Islam after the Arab Spring. Raeesa has also participated in the Model UN debate, which was offered at the University of Pretoria, and performed extremely well in the final outcome. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome, Raeesa.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and thank you for having me.
You are most welcome. Actually, it is our honor to have you here. Raeesa, as a Muslim student, as a Muslim woman, I would like to know, what drew you to law and international relations?
Well, I can't put my finger on it exactly, but since from a young age, I've always had an interest in international affairs, current affairs. And we grew up in a family where we often discussed such issues. We had a lot of relatives who were very politically active in the past and till today to some extent. And I think that fostered a greater interest. And obviously tertiary education only builds on that.
Yes, definitely. And do you feel that Muslim women who work in secular courts, for example, because you are pursuing a law degree now, so women who work in secular courts can be compromised in terms of their gender and religion? Because, I mean, the most famous argument from many of the scholars who prevent Muslim women from seeking an education is that they say that once you go into the work environment, there is a fitna, you will be tempted, there will be difficulties, etc. Do you believe that a Muslim woman will be compromised once she enters that environment?
Specifically in a courtroom in South Africa, because we live in a country as diverse as ours, because our religious freedoms are constitutionally enshrined, I think that this is the one space specifically where women wouldn't be compromised, where these women would know more than anyone what their rights are and would work to enforce it. In terms of gender, it is still a male-dominated profession, and you have to deal with that. In any sector, I think, we have to deal with these issues, but I think that law specifically works against that compromising of gender or religion.
And I think it's only fair to admit that even in the Muslim majority countries, it's male dominated. It's very patriarchal societies.
Definitely.
So it's not as if there is, in a Muslim environment, any more space or safety. I mean, we know that for sure, isn't it?
Yes, and in Western countries as well. I think we'd find the same challenges. Women would face the same challenges as in Muslim societies. It's not to say that we live in a perfect Muslim world where people abide by Islamic rules or laws. The point is to strengthen yourself as a woman, as a Muslim woman, and carry that identity through, instead of hiding or holding back and ignoring the situation or living aloof, from the problem.
Do you believe that Muslim women who maintain their Islamic identities are respected in the workplace? Yes, yes.
I think the way you dress, the way you carry yourself, your demeanor at work, in the workplace, the way you interact with maybe male colleagues, ultimately that sends out a signal and dictates how you will be treated. And I think because we live in such a diverse country where we'll meet people of all races, cultures, colors, we are not seen as all that foreign or strange, as opposed to Europe, for example, where a woman in hijab would face many issues, at work, or face some sort of abuse, or even if it's subtle abuse, even if it's where people,
even
maintain a
discrimination in
distance.
terms of employment, etc. Yes, I mean, you're overlooked. A kind of be in a different sense, I would anticipate. What I would like to touch on now is something I think very prominent and which has affected many of us. But I want to just read this to you about Rashid Ghannouchi, who is the leader of the Ennahda party in Tunisia. He is reported to have said that women, being one half of the Islamic community, should have full access to education. According to Ghannouchi, oppressive cultural codes in Islamic cultures act as the major force behind women's choices to turn to Western culture. So the way the Islamic culture is interpreted or is practiced, it becomes so oppressive that it actually forces women to turn to Western cultures. And he believes that Islamic reform, as part of a larger reformist movement, is needed to address women's education, participation, and respect. And of course, if one has to consider Rashid Ghannouchi's three daughters, Yusra, Sumayya, and Intisar, you will see that although they have adopted a very strong identity of their own in terms of the Western societies that they have been in, they still maintain their Islamic identity, and they seem to be very proud of it. So what do you think was or is the role of Muslim women in the Arab Spring?
I think the Muslim women played a huge role in the Arab Spring. I don't think there was a particular distinction in the sense that men did more or women did more. They were as active. I'm talking about demonstrations or voter participation, or whether it was social networking to create awareness. I think it was a shared responsibility, a shared effort.
This highlights also the education level of the woman, of course, firstly, and the realization that political participation is important to a better life, isn't it?
And I think for these women, it wasn't just about breaking political barriers, about political tyranny, but also breaking through those social norms and also Western perceptions of Muslim women as being very subservient or docile or uninterested in active.
Or an intellect,
exactly.
Actually.
So this broke through many stereotypes, many barriers. I think they played a very big role. In countries like Yemen, for example, Yemen specifically surprised me. We saw women coming out in their numbers, women in not only hijab but niqab as well, protesting side by side with men. And we have to look at this in context, because Yemen is a very conservative, very traditional country, as opposed to, let's say, Tunisia or Egypt.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there before we need to go for our break. When we come back, we will pick up on the role of Muslim women in the Arab Spring. And of course, at this point, we should acknowledge Tawakkul Kamal, who was one of the Nobel Peace Prizes that was awarded this year. She was one of the 3 recipients in the Nobel Peace Prize award this year. And she came from Yemen. She's a journalist and she is an activist. So we'll pick up this part of the conversation when we come back from the break. Welcome back. You are watching Finding Me on ITV. When we went for the break, we had just touched the question about the role of women in the Arab Spring, and Raeesa spoke about her particular fascination with Yemen, which is a very conservative society, and of course the amount of women, especially those who wore niqab, hijab, etc., who came in and participated. Raeesa, was there anything else that you felt that, you know, touched you about the participation of Muslim women in the Arab Spring or in Yemen per se?
I think overall, I think this should be lauded, and I think many people don't know this, but it's not the first time that this has happened. In 1919, in Egypt's previous revolution against British colonialism and occupation, women were out in their numbers as well. Obviously not in the same way as now, but there were female martyrs as well back then. So it's not to say that this is new. Yes, yeah. We might be going back to our roots in a sense, but this is nothing new as say.
So it's great that it shows that the women have always been active in the political space or social space, economic space, in all the spaces. But of course, with culture and tradition, there has become a new norm where unfortunately, certain sects have tried to hold women back or have given this impression that Muslim women are not capable of anything much more than just being in their home, being secluded, etc., isn't it?
I think that's an important point. We have to distinguish between cultural norms, social norms, and religion, because Islam affords women all the rights necessary, everything, all protection is given and in place. It's social norms, it's social barriers that actually hold us back, and that's what we need to work on and focus on.
Yes, and it's the culture that's the most important influence that is holding us back, of course. Do you feel that Muslim women have contributed to the rise of Islamist parties in Egypt and Tunisia through their votes?
I think that these are 2 very different cases. In Egypt, yes, I think we witnessed a lot of support for the Muslim Brotherhood, female support, and I think that this has got to do with some sentimental attachment, because the Brotherhood was always the oppressed party. The way we viewed the ANC maybe during the apartheid years, there's still some sentimental attachment here with the Brotherhood, and I think that's garnered a lot of support. In Tunisia, however, from my research, I've seen a lot of women with very wary attitudes towards Islamist parties. I don't like using that word. Yes. I feel it's very loaded. But towards these Islamic parties, I feel Tunisia might be more liberal, more secular, more Western in their thinking, in their approach.
But I have to stop you there, because although that might be, isn't there, don't you think there's a divide in Tunisia? Because of course you have the secular, liberal individuals, the more educated, the upper class, the elite who identified with the French values, the colonial influence, the master's influence per se. But there was also the other group of women within Tunisia who wanted the Islamic identity, but because of the ruling dominant party, which brought in a secular system, which banned the wearing of the headscarf. Yes, they were forced to subdue the Islamic identity. And now, of course, with the revolution, with the change, they're hoping to express their identity. So you have a duality. One where you have the secular Muslim or the liberal identity, and then, of course, you have the Muslim woman who recognizes the right to participate, who knows about her rights, who has all this knowledge, but was, of course, oppressed by so-called liberal governments.
I understand. I think, okay, maybe we do see a duality. A duality, definitely. And it's actually sad to a point that society has been polarized along these lines, you know, Islamic values and then secular values. There was an issue, I think, in January this year with Nisma TV, that was fined for showing a movie, for broadcasting a movie which they thought was, which the court deemed blasphemous, which depicted a physical picture of God. And people protested against this decision and said, and there was a female protester specifically who came out and said, hey, we regressed so much that we protesting a film and it's just art and it's a movie. And we knew this would happen when the Islamists took over. And she was a Muslim woman. And so you have that fear. And the thing is, you wonder, even before things like this happen, even before laying out their policies, these parties were fingered. Islamists.
Yes,
why?
yes, the threat was created.
Yes,
it's
a mental
regress.
thing,
Yes.
and it's sort of tragic because we haven't given these parties enough of an opportunity to prove themselves or put forward their actual ideas.
You know, I read a very interesting quote there, because usually it's always about Islam, this Islam, that, but it was I think Sheikh Abdul Hakim Green, he said that what we should ask is liberalism compatible with Islam, not is Islam compatible with liberalism, because liberalism pursues a very individualistic ideology, and it seems to be that we claim about tolerance, but liberalism is intolerant to everything else but its own ideology, and is also, so we should really ask, is liberalism actually tolerant to Islam? And if you really look at it, the Tunisian society claimed to be secular, claimed to be a liberal society, but was totally intolerant of Islam. So we need to put the boot or the shoe on the other foot.
But, why adopt an approach like that when we have the groundwork, when Islam presents a perfect foundation? Why would we be looking for a different ideology upon which to base a political regime or a future political regime?
We have that already in Islam. Yes, definitely, and I agree with you. But before we come to touch more about the Islamic State and what we have in the terms of the foundation, what do you feel about the voices of Muslim women in Turkey? Also, because we know that the Turkish society was also very secular. Islam was Muslim women and Islamic identities were repressed, oppressed very much in Turkey. Of course, now with the AKP, and you see the same negativity being pointed at the AKP continuously, because they claim it's an Islamic party. They're going to bring in Sharia. This threat is created all the time that anything related to Islam is bad. So what do you feel has been or should be recognized about the Muslim voices, specifically the female Muslim voices in Turkey?
I think these voices should be lauded. Really, I think, like as you say, they've been dealing with years and years and decades, actually, of the secularization, liberalization that was literally forced down their throats by Ataturk's policies when he came in and banned the hijab. And so I think they face a lot, and they faced it for a much longer period than people in, let's say, France or Denmark or wherever else. However, I think it's not just from the top down that this issue comes about. It's not just government or institutions that they're dealing with in Turkey. It's the general population. If you were following the recent issue of abortion legislation, which they were thinking of passing in Turkey, you would have seen the female population being polarized. You know, some who were for the legislation and some who were against it, or for female rights and human rights, and forgetting Islamic injunctions. So I think it's not just, like as I say, not just government that we're thinking of, not just institutional repression, but it's among them.
Amongst
them themselves. They are a divided population in that sense.
It's almost as if we're being taught that when you come out, you live in a particular box, and when you go home, then you go into your Islamic identity. It's not as if you can carry Islam forward and live your Islam, isn't it? It's almost scary, as if to say that Islam doesn't work in the public place. Yes, we have to, unfortunately, I have to stop you here. When we come back, I would like to talk a little bit more about the Islamic identity and Muslim unity, and then to touch on a very important aspect, which is about the current South African social, political environment and the status quo of Muslims, especially Muslim women, in this particular environment. So when we come back, we will get back straight onto this particular discussion. Thank you, and welcome back to Finding Me on ITV. Raeesa Cachalia is our guest today, and we are concluding the last segment with Muslim women's identity, and specifically focusing on the South African Muslim woman and the South African political environment. Raeesa, before we went to the break, we spoke about this cross purposes at which Muslim women and Muslim societies find themselves in, where you're forced to live a public kind of a secular life and a private kind of a Muslim life. But of course, we have a different concept in the environment when Muslim women go out into the political environment or the public space, as we discussed earlier about the blue bra woman and the other things that you were telling me on. Perhaps you would like to elaborate on that.
I think with that specific issue, the blue bra woman in Egypt, who was made a very public figure, unintentionally. She was, if people don't know, she was beaten by I think it was four security officials in Tahrir Square. She was wearing an abaya, she was covered in hijab,
and they undressed her.
They undressed her in public, and her underwear was exposed.
And of course, in all probability, it was Muslim men who did that. I mean, we have to assume that, right?
That's
yes.
the thing.
Okay.
And she was exposed, they beat her, they kicked her, she was lying on the ground, and they physically dragged this woman. And watching this, I thought to myself, you know, this is shocking on so many levels. First of all, it's the fellow countrywoman.
Yes.
You know, it's a fellow Egyptian. What feeling is there? And above that, it's your Muslim sister. How? You know, where were the values? It made me wonder, is loyalty to the regime more important? Has that overrun Islamic Muslim unity in Egypt? And not only Egypt, but I mean many other places. It was very shocking to see such brutality upon their own people, upon women, your Muslim sister who you should be protecting.
Of course.
So I think it raises deeper issues.
And also in terms of the liberation, because you gave me the example of Alia Maghda al-Mahdi and Golshifter for Hani. I hadn't heard about the case of these two women. And then, of course, you raised the question about liberation, whose liberation, and when we speak about identity, on what standards. Of course, the reality is that the people who give the definitions, those who define, are the ones who have power, isn't it? Because if you give the definition, then you control the outcome, because you now know in setting the responses or the limits, etc. So in terms of these two examples, perhaps you would like to elaborate for us as well.
Specifically, Alia Mahdi al-Mahdi, I saw the pictures in question, the nude pictures that she posted on her blog, and she said it was against political repression and women's repression, and you know, I'm speaking out, and that was her way of
So her way of responding to political oppression was to expose her body.
To expose her body. And she's, I think, 20 years old or 19, and I have a sister that's same age. And I couldn't imagine, you know, it's that stage where you're figuring things out. And I thought this young woman is so disillusioned. She's so, I don't know if it's confused. Yes. I thought to myself, this young woman is so disillusioned or so confused. You know, there are so many other ways, so many other beautiful ways, so many other progressive ways to express yourself. Why did she choose this way specifically? And then I thought to myself, is this the Western mentality that has crept into the Muslim psyche? You know, to say that, you know, be free and do what you want, and there aren't any barriers. You know, Islam is a civilizing force. To say that there are boundaries, there are limits, there are ways, it's a guide. You know, we're not saying don't protest, but do it in a specific way. But then by
using her body in this absolute, wasn't she then succumbing to the very factors that bring about the slavery of the Muslim woman, or any woman for that matter, or ridicule a woman, any woman, no matter what religion is? So she had actually taken the total opposite of what she was actually trying to achieve, I think.
That's the amazing thing, that we don't see that exploitation as exploitation anymore. Go to Amsterdam and you will see women in windows, and that's, I mean, you know, it's the most ridiculous thing. And you think, is this liberation? Is this freedom? Is this enlightenment? But I think over centuries, if you are given an idea, you are told something often enough, you actually start to believe that. It actually gets embedded if you have no solid foundation.
Okay, that also, while you're speaking about that, reminds me of when one of my students was talking to me about this. I think it was a Yemeni man or somebody in the Arab world who basically married a very young woman and talked about the Islamic repressive culture. And I said, but if you really look at it, prostitution is rife in non-Muslim societies and countries. The mistresses are rife. You find that, rather than marrying a woman, they will have more mistresses, etc. But you don't look at these things. But however, we're running out of time now, and I would like you to tell me what you feel passionate or very strongly about in terms of the South African Muslim and the South African Muslim woman and the role that they need to start playing now in terms of establishing their identity.
Okay, this is a complex issue. I think there's a lot that we can touch on here. Through my studies and now recent work experience, what I've noticed a lot over the years, over the past, let's say 7 or so years, is the very strong apathy or ignorance specifically of women and youth when it comes to international affairs or even current affairs, domestic affairs here in South Africa. It strikes me as odd. We see the Muslim society living very aloof from social issues.
Almost like in a bubble.
Almost like in a bubble.
And very little political participation, etc. And of course there's big controversy, should we vote, shouldn't we vote, etc. All of those things.
And I think the way of a Muslim dictates that you should engage. You should engage with your neighbors, with your relatives, with your wider community. There's a shared responsibility, in contrast to, let's say, a European approach, or a new liberal approach where
individualism, yes. We should care about everybody, irrespective of whether you're Muslim or not. If there is injustice, you address the injustice. If there is corruption, you speak out against it. It shouldn't be just because it's not a Muslim ruler or not a Muslim country that you be quiet on it, isn't it?
Yeah, is that the reason why we've remained aloof from these issues? But I think civil society is playing such a big role in democracy, in our growing democracy at the moment. It's civil society that's carrying this through, that's seeing that government sticks to our constitutional values, that's actually holding this up. For example, the textbooks that were delivered or not even delivered 6 months late, it was a civil society organization that took this up with the Department of Education and demanded these rights.
So as a parting, what shall I say, as a parting thought, what would you like to tell the Muslim woman in South Africa and the youth per se? What is important? What should they do?
I think that as Muslim women, we need to reevaluate our identities. I think we have to see our Islamic values as something that gives power, not takes it away. And we can progress, whether it's in your home, whether it's outside, the way you interact, the way you carry yourself, all sends out a message. And I think we have to strengthen that identity, because there's so much coming from outside working against us. We need to counter that. We need to definitely find a way to counter that. And in South Africa, we are much better off than many other countries. For example, we're more developed than an African country. We have access to education. Financial resources are abundant in South Africa as well. I'm talking about our Muslim community. So there shouldn't be any reason for this holding back of our society. Yes.
Thank you very much for being with us today,
Thank you so much for your time.
As a parting thought, I would like to leave you with these words. Egyptian individual that I met in Fortsburg, and he said to me, "Kama takunu yuwallikum Allah." And so that is true. How we are, God will then put people to rule over us. Just as a parting thought, also in terms of the spirit of the woman, there was a very nice saying that I found, and it says, "Be the kind of woman who, when your feet hit the floor in the morning, the devil says, 'Oh no, she's up.'" So till then, see you next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasul